We've all stood before a closed door, haven't we? A dream that slipped through our fingers, a relationship that didn't last, an opportunity we wanted so badly, but no matter how hard we knocked, the door never opened. And in that moment, it's easy to feel abandoned, forgotten, maybe even punished. We cry out, "Lord, why? I thought this was meant for me." But what if that closed door wasn't rejection? What if it was protection? So, what if it was protection? What if God, in his infinite wisdom, saw something we couldn't see? What if he wasn't holding something back from us, but guiding us towards something far better? We don't always understand his ways. Our vision is limited. We see the now, but he sees the full picture. We stand at the door, convinced that what's behind it is exactly what we need, but he sees what's beyond that door. He sees the disappointments, the dangers, the detours that we would have walked into had we forced it open. And so in his mercy, he closes it, not to harm us, but to save us. Think about Joseph. His brothers betrayed him. They threw him into a pit and sold him into slavery. He was falsely accused and thrown into prison. Every door in his life seemed to be shutting one after another. But was God punishing him? No. He was preparing him. Every closed door was leading him closer to his destiny. Because in the end, Joseph wasn't meant to stay in the pit. He wasn't meant to stay in prison. He was meant for the palace. And if those doors had never closed, he never would have walked into the purpose God had for him. And I wonder how many of us are mourning closed doors when we should be thanking God for them. How many of us are standing at a door frustrated and heartbroken when God is whispering, "Trust me, I have something greater." But I know it's not easy. When the door closes, we feel the loss. We feel the sting of disappointment. But faith is believing that God is still working, even when we don't understand. Faith is trusting that his no is just as much a blessing as his yes. Some of you are standing before a door that is just shut. Maybe it's a relationship that ended, a job that fell through, a dream that seems out of reach. And the enemy wants to convince you that it's over, that you've missed your chance, that God has forgotten you. But hear me, God does not close doors to leave you empty. He closes them because he has something better. He closes them because he loves you too much to let you settle. And one day you will look back and thank him for every closed door. You will see that the very thing you thought was a loss was actually grace. You will see that he was never rejecting you. He was rescuing you. So, if the door has closed, don't stand there knocking. Don't beg for something God has already moved you from. Walk forward. Trust him. Because what he has for you is greater than anything you could have planned for yourself. We don't always see what God is protecting us from. We stand at the door, pounding on it, pleading for it to open, convinced that what's on the other side is exactly what we need. But we don't see the full picture. We don't see what he sees. And that's where faith comes in. How many times have we looked back on something we once wanted and thanked God that he never gave it to us? How many times have we cried over a lost opportunity, only to realize later that it was never meant for us in the first place? Because here's the truth. God knows what's ahead, and he knows what we don't. He knows the heartbreak that would have come if we had stayed in that relationship. He knows the pain that would have followed if we had forced that opportunity. He knows the unseen dangers, the hidden traps, the weight of things we were never meant to carry. And so, in his love, he shuts the door. There's a story in Scripture that speaks to this so powerfully. The Israelites wanted a king. They looked around and saw the other nations, and they cried out, "Give us a king!" And God gave them one, Saul. From the outside, he looked like the perfect leader. He was tall, strong, impressive. But God saw what they didn't. And in the end, Saul's reign brought more pain than blessing. So when Saul's time came to an end, God had already prepared someone else, David, a man after his own heart. But even then there was resistance. Even then people clung to the old, afraid to step into the new. And isn't that what we do? We hold on to what we think is best, what looks good in our own eyes, forgetting that God always has something greater. Some of you have been asking God, why did this happen? Why did this person leave? Why did this door close? And you don't have an answer yet, but I want to remind you of something. Just because you don't see the danger doesn't mean it's not there. Just because you don't understand the reason doesn't mean there isn't one. Have you ever seen a parent pull a child away from something harmful? Maybe it was a fire or a busy road or something sharp and dangerous. The child doesn't always understand in the moment. They might cry, they might feel frustrated, but the parent isn't trying to take something good from them. They are protecting them from something that could hurt them. And that's what God does with us. He pulls us back, He closes doors, He redirects our steps, not to punish us, but to save us. And here's the hard part. Sometimes He never tells us why. Sometimes we don't get to see what He was keeping us from. We just have to trust that if the door closed, there was a reason. We just have to believe that His protection is greater than our disappointment. One day you will understand. One day you will see the things that could have broken you, the situations that could have drained you, the wrong paths that could have led you away from your purpose. And on that day, you will thank Him for every closed door. So don't fight what God is trying to remove. Don't chase after something He has already walked away from. Trust Him. Because when He closes a door, He's not rejecting you. Sometimes what feels like a delay is really divine timing. What seems like disappointment is actually God's hand positioning you for something far greater. But in the moment, it doesn't always feel that way, does it? We pray, we hope, we work, and yet the door remains closed. The opportunity doesn't come. The answer doesn't arrive. And in that waiting, we start to wonder, has God forgotten me? Has He left me behind? But let me tell you something. God is never late. He is never behind schedule. Every delay, every detour, every moment of waiting is intentional. We may not see it now, but in time we will understand. Think about Lazarus. Mary and Martha sent word to Jesus saying, Lord, the one you love is sick. They expected Him to come immediately. They thought, surely He will arrive in time. Surely He will stop this from happening. But Jesus delayed. He didn't come when they expected Him to. He didn't move on their timeline, and Lazarus died. Can you imagine how they must have felt? The heartbreak, the confusion, the disappointment. They had faith in Jesus, but He didn't come when they thought He would. But when Jesus finally arrived, He wasn't late. He was right on time, because He wasn't just coming to heal Lazarus. He was coming to raise him from the dead. And that's the thing about God's timing. It rarely looks like ours. We want immediate answers, but God is working on something deeper. We want doors to open now, but He's preparing us for something we're not ready to walk into yet. So often we see delays as disappointments. We think if something doesn't happen when we expect it to, then it must not be meant for us. What if He's using the waiting to prepare us for what's coming next? Joseph was given a dream that one day he would be a ruler, but instead of stepping straight into that promise, he was sold into slavery. He was falsely accused. He was thrown into prison. Years went by, and I wonder if he ever thought, God, did you forget? You gave me a vision of my future, but all I see is hardship. But in every moment, God was positioning him. Had Joseph gone straight from the dream to the throne, he wouldn't have been ready. He had to be shaped, refined, prepared. The prison was not the end of his story. It was a part of his preparation. And the same is true for you. That delay you're facing is not a denial. That disappointment is not the end of the road. It may feel like everything is against you, but what if everything is actually working for you? What if the very thing you see as a setback is the thing that is setting you up for your breakthrough? One day you will look back and see the hand of God in every closed door, every delay, every season of waiting. You will see that He was never withholding from you. He was preparing you. So don't lose faith. Don't let disappointment steal your trust in Him, because when God closes a door, He is not just stopping something. He is setting something in motion. And when the time is right, no force in this world will keep that door from opening. There are moments in life when we hold on to things that were never meant for us. We cling to relationships, opportunities, dreams, and places that feel safe, that feel familiar. And when God begins to close a door, we resist, we pull and push, trying to force it back open. Because deep down, we believe that if we let go, we will lose something we can't live without. But what if what we're clinging to is actually holding us back? What if the very thing we're afraid to release is the one thing standing between us and what God has planned? We've all been there, standing in the middle of a chapter we don't want to end, gripping so tightly to what was, afraid of what will be. But God, in His love, sometimes removes things from our grasp, not to punish us, but to free us, to lead us into something greater. Think about Abraham. God told him to leave his homeland, to step away from everything familiar and walk toward a promise. But Abraham didn't even know where he was going. God didn't give him a full roadmap. He just said, go. And Abraham had a choice. He could have stayed. He could have clung to what was comfortable, to what made sense. But had he done that, he would have missed the blessing God had in store. Some of us are standing at that same crossroads. God is calling us forward, but we are too attached to what's behind us. We say we want His will, but we're unwilling to release our own plans. We say we trust Him, but we keep reaching back for what He has already told us to leave behind. And sometimes He has to close the door for us, because He knows if He doesn't, we'll never step into what He has prepared. He knows our hearts. He knows our tendency to stay where it's safe, where it's comfortable. And so, in His mercy, He removes the thing we were never meant to hold on to in the first place. It may not make sense at the time. It may feel painful, confusing, even unfair. But one day, you will look back and understand. One day, you will see that if God had allowed you to stay in that place, if He had let you hold on to that relationship, that opportunity, that version of your life, you would have missed what He was trying to give you. Think about a child holding on to a small toy, gripping it tightly, unwilling to let go. The parent stands there with something so much better, something greater in their hands, but the child is too afraid to release what they have. And aren't we the same way? We hold on to things because they feel safe. We hold on to people because we don't want to be alone. We hold on to dreams because we're afraid to dream again. But God is saying, if you would just let go, if you would just trust me, I would show you something greater than you ever imagined. Some of you are struggling with a closed door right now. You're holding on to a version of life that God is asking you to release. You're standing in front of something that has already ended, but you don't want to move forward. But hear this. What God has for you is never behind you. It is always ahead. You cannot embrace what's next if your hands are full of what was. You cannot walk into your future if you're still holding on to your past. So let go. Trust Him. Because what He is leading you toward is far greater than anything you're leaving behind. There are moments when God closes a door, and no matter how much we push, no matter how much we plead, it will not open. And when that happens, We have a choice. We can stand there frustrated and heartbroken, staring at what was lost, or we can turn our eyes to what lies ahead, trusting that He has already prepared the next step. But let's be honest, that's not always easy. When we don't know what's next, when we don't have all the answers, it's tempting to freeze in place, to stay stuck in what could have been, to keep knocking on a door that has already been shut. But God never closes a door without preparing another way forward. He is always leading us, even when we don't understand where we're going. The question is, will we trust Him enough to follow? Think about the Israelites. They had been set free from Egypt. But when they reached the Red Sea, they panicked. They saw no way forward. Behind them, the enemy was closing in. In front of them, the waters stretched wide and deep, and they cried out, "Lord, did you bring us here just to leave us?" But God had already prepared a way. He told Moses, "Lift your staff." And when Moses obeyed, the waters parted, and a path appeared where there had been no path before. And I wonder how many of us are standing at our own Red Sea moments. How many of us are staring at the door that has closed, unable to see the way forward? How many of us are asking, "God, what now?" But if we would just trust Him, if we would just keep moving, we would see that He has already gone ahead of us. The path may not be visible yet, but that doesn't mean it's not there. Sometimes we have to take the first step before the waters will part. Some of you are waiting for clarity before you move. You're saying, "Lord, show me the whole plan, then I'll step forward." But faith doesn't work like that. Faith is stepping out, even when we don't see the whole picture. Faith is believing that if He closed one door, it's because He has already prepared another. Abraham didn't see the full plan before he left his homeland. Joseph didn't see the palace when he was in the prison. Peter didn't see solid ground when he stepped out of the boat, but they all had one thing in common. They moved forward. And that's what we must do. Some of you have been standing in front of a closed door for too long. You've been looking at what's behind you, wondering why things had to change, why certain people left, why certain opportunities passed you by. But God is saying, look ahead. I am doing something new. The road is prepared. The way is set. All you have to do is walk forward. And here's the beautiful thing. When we finally move, when we finally trust, we see His hand in ways we never could have imagined. We see that every closed door was leading us to something greater. We see that He was never leaving us. He was guiding us. So don't be afraid to take the next step. Don't let fear or uncertainty keep you standing still. What God has prepared is always better than what He has closed. The door may be shut, but the path ahead is open. Walk forward, trust Him, because He is already waiting for you on the other side. When God closes a door, it's easy to focus on what we've lost. It's easy to dwell on the unanswered prayers, the dreams that didn't come to pass, the relationships that ended, the opportunities that slipped away. And if we're not careful, we can let that disappointment turn into doubt. We can start to wonder, did I hear God wrong? Did I make a mistake? Why would He let this happen? But hear me. Just because you don't understand something doesn't mean God. Just because a door has closed doesn't mean He has abandoned you. His silence is not His absence. His delay is not His denial. And what you see as the end of something may very well be the beginning of something far greater. Think about the disciples after the crucifixion. They had walked with Jesus, seen His miracles, heard His teachings. They had left everything to follow Him, believing that He was the promised King. But then in the span of a few days, it all came crashing down. The one they had given their lives to was nailed to a cross. And as they watched Him take His last breath, I wonder if they thought this wasn't supposed to happen. This isn't how the story was supposed to go. Saturday must have been the longest day of their lives, a day of silence, a day of confusion, a day of wondering if they had placed their faith in the wrong thing. But what they didn't realize was that even though they couldn't see it, God was still moving. Even though it looked like the end, the greatest victory in history was only hours away, because on Sunday morning, that sealed tomb would break open. That closed door, the one that looked like the final word, was about to be shattered by the power of resurrection. And maybe that's where you are right now, in the middle of your Saturday, stuck in the silence, staring at a closed door, wondering if that's how your story ends. But I want you to know something. The story isn't over. God is not finished. Just because you don't see movement doesn't mean he isn't working behind the scenes. Just because the door is shut now doesn't mean it will be shut forever. Sometimes God closes a door to protect you. Sometimes he closes a door to redirect you. And sometimes he closes a door because he is about to open something so much greater, something you never even thought to ask for. The problem is, we get so fixated on what we thought should happen that we don't even realize he is writing a better story. We get so focused on the disappointment that we miss the bigger picture. But if we could step back, if we could see things from his perspective, we would understand that every no, every delay, every closed door is part of a greater plan. That's why faith is so important. Faith isn't trusting God when everything makes sense. Faith is trusting him when nothing makes sense. Faith is believing that even in the silence, even in the waiting, even in the moments when we feel forgotten, he is still at work. So whatever door has closed in your life, don't let it steal your hope. Don't let it make you bitter. Don't let it convince you that God has forgotten you, because he hasn't. The same God who parted the sea, who moved the stone, who turned mourning into dancing, that same God is still in control of your story. And when the time is right, he will open the door that was meant for you all along. And when he does, you will understand why every closed door was necessary. You will see that his plan was always greater than your own. And you will know beyond a shadow of a doubt that he never left you, not for a moment.